Welcome to the MVP podcast, where we talk about anything NBA. I'm Sam Holcroft, alongside Gage Zollicoffer and Peyton Thompson. Before we begin, don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Momentum MVP, follow our Facebook page at MVP Momentum Podcast, check us out on YouTube at MVP Momentum Podcast. Today, we're going to do our head coaching tier list. So this is where we think that these coaches are going to be in terms of whatever our criteria is. Our categories are, we have championship caliber, so if they can make any team some sort of championship caliber team, whether they'll make a team a playoff bound team year in, year out. They need a solid team to make it and have success. Or there's the coaches that even a super team can't save you. And then our fifth category is to be determined. Those coaches that are on our to be determined list, we decided they have to at least coach 2 years as a head coach before we could kind of consider them in our tier list. So Jordi Fernandez from the Nets does not qualify. Darko Raju, I can never say his last name, for the Raptors. Sorry, Luis. Does not qualify. Kenny Atkinson from the Cavs does not qualify. Charles Lee from the Hornets does not qualify. Brian Keefe from the Wizards does not qualify. And then JJ Redick from the Lakers does not qualify. Everyone else we're able to have an opinion on and tier list them. So
Darko Rahovic.
But so do we want to kind of go into kind of what we were kind of thinking in our criteria for everything, or should we just kind of go into it and start explaining?
I think we just go into it.
All right. So do we want to start with some obvious ones, or do we want to start at the top of the order? Go down the line? Okay. So Nick Nurse from the 76ers.
And before we start doing this, also I feel like in each tier we need to actually rank them. So like we need to be able to move around in tiers. Okay. Not just put them in the same tier. All right? Fair enough?
I agree. Playoff bound.
You talking about Nick Nurse?
Yeah, playoff bound. Or low tier champion.
I would say high playoff bound's a good spot to put him at. He's won a championship before, but it kind of, with the Raptors, it was kind of in his favor with hurt teams, and which I don't take anything away from that, but since he's been there, he hasn't been back. He's had a couple good teams, but he's always going to be in the playoffs, with the Sixers the past year, and then with the Raptors before that, even when they had I guess they didn't make the playoffs. They were a play-in team when they had the first year with Scotty, I think it was. So, but he's a solid head coach. I really like his offensive mind. And there's a reason why he's been a head coach for a long time. So I think a high playoff bound team is solid, but eventually there's going to be a coach we probably put above him for sure.
Yeah, I think playoff bound is where he deserves. I mean, he is one of the very few coaches on this list that has a championship, but that was also with Kawhi Leonard, a superstar. Hasn't really had someone of that caliber since. He has made it to the conference finals one other time, that next year. But other than that, been made the playoffs every year, but 1 year. And who knows if they would have had Joel Embiid against the Knicks this year, then a healthy Joel Embiid, they might have had a better chance to make some sort of run, try to challenge Boston.
Yeah.
So we're good with playoff bound there?
Yep.
All right. So we got Joe Mazzulla from the Celtics.
Low tier champion.
Yeah.
Low
I think that's the perfect place to put in low tier champion, because he's had to have the right team to do it, but at the same time you can't really hold that against him, and they did just win the championship this year, so he's there, he makes that there.
Yeah, and whether you want to see it as, they could have been finished in 4 games last year in the ECF, or they were 1 game away from going to the NBA Finals last year. It depends on how you kind of view that situation, because they were down 3-0 to the Heat. But at the same time, they did win 3 games, got it to a Game 7. I would have probably pushed more for a playoff bound, but since you guys are both kind of like with the champions, just because of how good his 2 teams have been, and he's only had it's a small sample
He's
size.
he's high tier playoff bound or low tier championship, because the thing about the Celtics, it's less of a head coach thing and more of a system as a whole. And that's one of the teams that actually has everyone involved with the system. It's not just the coach.
Yeah, like for me, if we had more teams and champions, then I would put them as a high playoff bound team. But I don't think we're gonna have a whole lot of coaches in the champions bracket. So I think it only makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so then we're good with Joe Mazzulla and the champions. The next up is Tyronn Lue out of the Los Angeles Clippers.
Higher than the Celtics championship bound.
Really?
Yeah. Yes. But he's not.
Why
like
is that?
he's not. He's still low tier, but he's still higher than Celtics.
He's higher than the Celtics.
He's higher than Celtics because I really think that Joe Mazzulla, he's just, I mean, the Celtics organization is just doing a lot of good work. The front office is doing a lot of good work. So that's just how it's going to be.
Gage, change your audio to your
You can't.
mic.
Can't. We started recording.
Yeah. For me, honestly, I don't know what he's done outside of win one with LeBron to be considered a championship coach. I think he's going to be a guy that makes the playoffs every year, but I don't know how you could put him over the Celtics. You know, I think he's a good head coach, but I just don't know if he's proven to be a champion head coach. You know, outside the 1 year he had LeBron and Kyrie Irving. You know, and I think most coaches on this tier list would at least have made the ECF with that team. So, and even, you know, he's had some not necessarily chokes, but he's had some disappointing years with the Clippers as well. So,
what disappointing years?
Maybe this last year.
Disappointing.
This last year was disappointing.
No.
I mean, yeah,
No.
I think so. You lost in the first round.
I'm not putting Tyronn Lue below Joe Mazzulla.
You lost in the first round.
Yeah, with Kawhi only playing 2 games.
Whether it's Kawhi or not, they made that their situation. They made that their own roster, and he was a part of that. He was a part of that decision, and he's not. What do you call it? He's not unavailable for that accountability. So whether their health was a problem or not, he was a part of building the roster. And so that is just a part of building a championship team as a coach, because the coach works directly with the GM. And then what happened the year before that?
Again, they lost in the first round, and Kawhi went out after game 1.
Okay, so back-to-back first-round exits.
Okay.
I'm not saying it's on him completely.
Oh, and no Paul George, but no Paul George too.
And no Paul George.
Should probably include that. And then the year before that, they were the 8th seed into the play-in, and no Kawhi all season. And Paul George was hurt, didn't play in the play-in, and they missed the playoffs.
WCF. All right.
They made it to the WCF his first year.
Yeah.
That's not a championship coach to me.
That's a championship coach.
Not to me.
If you
guys want to overrule me and say that's a championship coach, you go ahead, but I don't think it is.
He's just higher than the Boston Celtics.
So are you gonna have him as your highest head coach potentially on this whole thing?
No, not at all.
So where is he gonna rank? 3rd, 4th, 5th?
It's gonna be around that level.
I mean, he is one of the coaches in Team USA too. It's not. I mean,
that's fine, but you know. I mean, that's fine.
And I mean,
in my opinion, roster building is flawed.
His roster building? What has he done?
He works directly with the GM to build the roster. That was his roster he wanted.
Doc Rivers was the guy that constructed this roster from the start.
Yeah, I understand that. But you can make changes once you're the head coach. You're telling me he has no say.
He went out and got James Harden.
He didn't do that. That was the GM, and he can do that.
You just said that the GM and head coach work hand in hand. Did you not?
So So if we're That's fine. If we're going to use that criteria, then he decided to go into the season with Kawhi and Paul George as well for the last 2 seasons. And it didn't work out. So sure, he got James Harden, but he didn't account for the availability of the 2 other players, the 2 best players on the roster. Or any draft picks for that matter. No, the draft picks were on him. I'll give him that.
Yeah, draft picks weren't on him.
But
if we're also going to talk about
else to make the roster better,
I mean, getting James Harden was,
okay. Besides that,
getting Russ last year on a cheap deal,
solid.
I mean, that's a good backup point guard.
Yeah, that got him a first round exit.
Because Kawhi went down and there was no PG. How many teams can win a series with their top 2 guys not playing?
How many? Let me ask you this on the flip side. I agree with you, but how many other teams besides maybe the Bucks had their best 2 players go down in the playoffs
this year?
This year.
Off the top of my head,
looking at these teams right here that we
have. Sixers did not.
Nope, Maxey was healthy.
Probably, technically, the Knicks.
Brunson was healthy.
I thought
he was ECF.
Yeah, until the East, or they didn't even make the ECF. That's a whole
different, or second round. But even then, he played.
I guess everyone else was at least one of their top 2 guys.
All I'm saying is that he trusted Paul George and Kawhi to be healthy for the playoffs, and they load managed them, and he was a big part of that. They load managed him the whole year, just for them to be hurt and have a first round exit. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, because that's definitely on Tyronn Lue. So I think
it is because he decided to load manage and it didn't work. So that is on him. Yeah.
Also including his Cavaliers tenure, because we got to keep in mind that he helped. It was a lot of LeBron, but he also helped that team get to the NBA Finals in 2018 when that team shouldn't have even.
I'm not saying he's a bad coach.
Let's encompass everything.
He's a playoff. Yeah, I'm not saying he's a bad coach. He deserves to be a playoff bound coach.
I mean, the guy who gave 2 cities their first ever. I mean, and you're not saying he's a better coach than Joe.
What other city?
Cleveland's their first, and then Clippers' first Western Conference.
Western Conference.
Dude, get out of here, bro. No, come on. We're not doing that first Western Conference Finals, bro. No. They didn't even win it. They didn't even win it.
No. Because there was no Kawhi again.
You don't give a team a first Western Conference Finals appearance. No.
Okay.
We're not doing that.
But then, I mean, who was even playing? Who was even playing at that point? Was it?
It doesn't matter. You don't PG, give a participation trophy for that. They weren't Western Conference Finals.
PG and Pat Bev
champions.
And who?
Darren's man.
But anyways, I don't want to beat this to a dead horse. You guys think he's a championship head coach? I don't.
I'm okay, kind of splitting the middle. I'm okay putting him right behind the Celtics, just because.
Put him in front of Joe Mazzulla.
Just because of the law of small sample size. The fact that he was 1 game away from being in the NBA Finals and won the NBA Finals this year.
I mean, by vote, we should have him in the middle anyways, because I don't think he's a championship coach anyways. Yeah. So if that's how we're doing the voting, that's how it should work anyways.
This it's already ruined. You have Joe Mazzulla ahead of. Oh my gosh.
He just won the championship
Joe Mazzulla's not going to be the top one.
And then he just made the finals the year before that.
It's the law of small sample size.
Our tier list is cooked.
And you know this.
The tier list is cooked after three
our
teams.
Tier list is cooked now.
Right. No, it was cooked from the beginning because we couldn't include JJ Redick in the champions tier, right?
Oh my gosh.
Right.
Yeah.
Next.
Okay. We're cooked. We're going to have
All
to...
right.
Can we we have to come back eventually,
Okay, put it ahead, because Gage is not willing to budge on it, so just put him ahead.
Yep.
It's fine. It's fine. Gage cannot get past it, so we'll just put him ahead.
Even the Clippers guy is being objective about it, but okay. With the Bucks, we have what's his name? Oh yeah, Doc Rivers. In fact, we were just talking about the Clippers. We can include that tenure in this conversation.
High tier red or orange?
I was going to say it's probably needs a solid team because they'll make the playoffs with a solid team. I mean, the Clippers did, I think, every single year. Yeah, every single year with Doc Rivers. And then with the Celtics, I think same thing. But he always had, he had the big three in Boston. He had the big three in LA. I think that this needs a solid team, but like I could see that being like a mid tier. If he would have done something the last few years in Philly, then we would have easily been able to put him in playoff bound. But
I think, and this might sound crazy, but just listen to my explanation. I think he's like a very, very low, like maybe last playoff bound tier guy, because whenever he is the head coach, he always makes the playoffs, and he is the type of coach that's going to make a bad team a lot better to at least make an 8 or a 7 seed. Even though he's not going to do anything, but that's not quite the criteria for playoff bound. Playoff bound is just you make the playoffs with whatever team you got, and I think he's probably one of the coaches in this whole tier list that has probably the best making the playoffs, percentage. So yeah, although he might not do anything in the playoffs, he's got disappointing teams. He's at least going to make the playoffs. I'm not saying that he should be anywhere close to the top. He should probably be the last team in playoff bound. But I don't think he necessarily needs a solid team to make the playoffs. And it's kind of tough because he's only really had a couple quote unquote mediocre teams in his tenure as head coach. But I mean, I'm okay putting him at needs a solid team because he usually has solid teams, but he's made teams that have been bad make the playoffs as well before. So, I think that kind of fits the definition, even though he may not do anything.
yeah, I wouldn't mind making him basically the last playoff bound coach.
What do you think, Gage?
I still think top orange, but that's just me.
I mean, we could do top orange, bottom yellow. Either way, it's pretty much the same thing. We can come back to it if there's too many teams in one as well.
Yeah, that's probably what we'll end up doing.
Yeah.
Next one, we got Taylor Jenkins from the Memphis Grizzlies.
Mid-orange?
Yeah. I would say so as well. He's always had to have a solid team, and if he doesn't have his best player, he's pretty much exiled from the playoffs.
Exactly. Even though he's had Marcus Smart and Jaren Jackson Jr., yes,
Desmond Bane, and health.
Yeah. I mean, health kind of derailed this season. That was just their story, but like, you could have still been at least like fighting for the play-in, even in the West.
Could have been. I feel like they could have against teams like the Rockets and the Lakers and Warriors. They could have been up there with the kind of talent they have on that roster.
Exactly. So we're cool with them right behind the Bucks.
I think that makes sense. Yeah.
All right. We got Mr. Billy Donovan.
I think he's our first super team can't save you team. I think so, because no matter what team he's had, he's always come up short with disappointment. I think his last really good team was the Thunder, I believe, with Kevin Durant and when Russell Westbrook, he blew that 3-1 lead against the Warriors, I think. I think that was his last year with the Warriors. Or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he was there until the kind of like rebuild started. Either way, he's had really good teams in the past, and he's never been able to get past the conference finals. I don't even know, maybe even second round. So, and even with the Bulls, like, they've had some good teams in the past, but they've never even been anything greater than a 6-7 seed. With Levine, DeRozan, Vucevic, a decent bench, Alex Caruso, one of the best role players in the league. He's never been able to really get them over the top. Even when they make the playoffs, they're a disappointing first round exit, or they're a play-in disaster team. So, yeah.
Gage?
Yep. Sounds good. That's where he needs to go.
Mm-hmm.
All right. The next guy we have is Quin Snyder from the Hawks.
Championship. Ahead of Celtics. Has never had the right team. Dude's a wizard.
Nah. He is a playoff-bound team. He's probably behind the Sixers. Even when he's had the teams that he constructed himself with the Jazz, he wasn't anything more than a second-round exit at
they've
best.
never made it to the Western Conference Finals.
Exactly.
Do you know how consistent that Jazz team was?
Great regular
you know how
season.
Consistent Utah Jazz was with Quin Snyder.
Yeah, great regular season team, but ultimately he could never get past the other coaches that just outcoached him. You know, and part of that is sticking with Rudy Gobert and not wanting to evolve. But that just is what it is. And then with the Hawks, he didn't really improve the team. When they made the playoffs, they were under McMillan, I believe. So,
well, they made the playoffs last year because McMillan got fired like halfway through. It was like January, I think, is when he took over.
Seed.
They were 7th seed.
Lost against the Celtics.
4-2 Boston.
Yeah.
And then this year they didn't.
But either way, their height was before that. It was when they win the ECF. And they've never been able to get back to that height again. He's always never been able to make it past the second round for the last 7 years he's been coaching in the NBA. I really do like his coaching philosophy as far as game planning, offensively and defensively. I like his staffs usually. I like his demeanor, but he just doesn't have something. I don't know exactly what it is. He doesn't have the intangibles to be able to get over the hump like some of these other coaches will have.
Yeah, I don't think I need to add much more to it.
I think him for his postseason success.
But that's what this is about.
That's what it's about. If you're just going to criticize him for postseason success, okay.
Well, the last couple years with the Hawks, he didn't do a great job either.
Except he took the Celtics to what, Game 6 or 5? Game 6?
But I thought you were talking about regular season now.
I'm saying, okay, so with the Atlanta Hawks team, they had Trae Young and they had, I don't even know who else they had. This was before DeJounte,
Clint Capella.
He's only been around for a year and a half.
Jalen Johnson, AJ Griffin, who he never used, who they picked in the first round.
Who's gone now?
I don't think that's serious. Sure, you can criticize him for like not making deep runs with the Utah Jazz.
But they were the 1 seed and lost to. They were tied 2-2 going back home against the Clippers, Kawhi-less, and got destroyed, and then couldn't win Game 6 and lost in 4, or it's lost in 6.
All right, it's fine.
There's the thing, no matter way you cut it up, he has flaws. You know.
Okay. All right. Next one is the Heat.
Erik Spoelstra with the Heat.
Okay,
I think we could put this guy in champions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is there any
no
any rebuttal?
No, not really. I think he's probably the smartest one of the smartest head coaches in the NBA. He has the rings from before. He's worked his way up from the grind, from being, I believe, one of the film staff when he originally started in the late 90s. One of the biggest things about the Heat is their culture, and that starts with Spoelstra in the front office with Pat Riley. And there's a reason why he's one of the longest tenured coaches in the NBA.
Yep. Next, we have the Jazz with, let's see, forgot his name.
Yeah, he hasn't been there too long.
Will Hardy.
That's Hardy. Yeah.
Yep. Coming off of his second year, so he just barely qualifies. It's kind of hard to
behind the Hawks.
Yeah. I like that, behind the Hawks, because he's shown that he can be a good coach even with a bad team. So I feel like once he actually gets time to build out his roster, I think he's actually going to be a really good head coach. He comes from the Greg Popovich tree along with Ime Udoka. I think he's going to be a really good head coach. I think they knew what they were doing with this hire. He just needs time to develop his team and get more young prospects. I feel like their draft this year was really solid. We'll have to see how it turns out. But even now they have a pretty good roster. I could see them being a sneaky play-in team at some point, whether it's this year or next year. but I like him as a head coach.
All right, I'm cool with that. Next, we have Mike Brown with the Kings.
Behind the Celtics, high playoff bound, I would say around there.
I would say in front of the Sixers. It's probably the highest playoff bound team right now because because with Mike Brown, for me, he's always had a pretty good roster with the Kings and he's always made the playoffs. So you got to give him that. But he also last year barely made the playoffs, and then when they did, they were a first round exit, and then the year before that, I know they're going up against the Warriors, but they were also a first round exit last year. I just feel like his teams, as of right now, and this might be roster construction, and if I ding Ty Lue for this, I have to ding other coaches for this too. It's something about the roster construction where there's just not enough defense implemented, where you have De'Aaron Fox, great offensive player. Keegan Murray, great offensive player. Malik Monk, great offensive player. Kevin Huerter, great offensive player. Sabonis, great offensive player. But there's just not enough roster balance, and ultimately, the GM, like I said, the GM and the coach work together on that, and that's kind of a big reason why they're a great regular season team. You don't really want to see them on a Thursday night at 9:30, but you are okay with playing them in the first round if that's the matchup you get,
Yeah, and with my thing with this is I feel like with getting DeRozan, like, how much of a factor did he play into that? Probably a little bit, enough to, be like, yeah, we need a change here, because they didn't even make the playoffs this last year. They were the 9 seed, beat the Warriors, I believe, and then no, they lost to the Warriors.
No, they lost, and then they beat the Pelicans. No,
the Pelicans beat the Warriors because the Kings were 1 and done in the play-in.
Oh, they didn't even make the playoffs this year.
Yeah, they were the 9 seed.
You're right. So they didn't even make the playoffs this year.
Yeah, and really, I don't think that they had any injuries that really derailed their season or anything. It was just a loaded West. That's what it came down to.
Yeah.
But they were also, if we remember, they were also fighting for a 6th seed in late March, and then they just kind of fell off there at the end.
Mm-hmm.
So with getting DeRozan, this could either pole vault him into champions, or we could find out that maybe he's not as good as we really think. But I am cool with putting him above the Quin Snyder and Nick Nurse kind of coaches.
Yeah, and like I said, if you don't think Mike Brown had a lot to do with getting DeMar DeRozan, I don't know how much more we have to talk about as far as roster construction, because like I said, it's just even more offense, But ultimately, I do kind of like how he built out the roster because I think it's very flexible in general. Because DeMar's on a cheap contract, Keegan Murray's just going to get better, hopefully, as he gets older. I don't know how much better, but and then De'Aaron Fox is a nice young building block, and I think Sabonis is immovable. So I think it's a nice roster. I just don't think it has the ability to win the championship because of the defensive liabilities.
Anything else to add, Gage?
Nope.
No. All right, next we got Tom Thibodeau with the New York Knicks.
I put him behind Spo.
Huh?
He's more of a meme for like his lineups.
Yeah, so I think this one might be spicy.
We can't. That's what I'm saying. We put Mazzulla a little too high. That's what I'm saying. It makes it really hard.
I don't think it makes it hard for me personally on this one.
Because he's better.
I would put him at either high solid team or low playoff bound. Because if you think about all the teams that he's had that have been good, they've all had one player that's like top 3 in their position or top 5 in their position. Like, think about it. So when they had Brunson, they've made the playoffs every year, but they've never been able to get to the ECF. Or they had Derrick Rose, and I think they might have made the ECF 1 year with Derrick Rose, but he got hurt. And that's
I don't think they made it.
I don't think they did either. I think they lost before that point. But yeah, his rotations are not smart. So, like, yeah, you're going to be a good team if you play all your best players 37, 38 minutes a game and run an 8-man rotation in the playoffs. You should do that. But ultimately, I don't remember the last time I've seen him coach a team that was not very good and exceed their expectations. And to me, that kind of says you're a mediocre coach that with the right team, you can make the playoffs and be a good team. But even with good teams, he's never made it to the top because he doesn't understand rotations. Or, I don't want to make it sound like I understand rotations better than him, but you know what I mean. Like he doesn't, when compared to other head coaches, he doesn't have the correct rotations to make his guys fresh and able to win in late game situations. So, and I like how he's built out the Knicks. I like how he's built out the Knicks.
He's never really had a favorite team, like out of the teams that are just the favorite to win it all. He's never had that.
Not even all top these coaches, 3, probably.
Out of all these coaches that we have as the champions, at one point they probably had a favorite that that they were able to all right, this team is one of the contenders of the year. And
maybe besides Mike Brown, but yeah.
So that's what I'm thinking. We're really pushing with Joe Mazzulla. You think me saying that Tibbs should be, somewhere around that, obviously less than Spo, but around Clippers range. I could argue between, greater than Tyronn or less than Tyronn. I'm fine with that. But there's going to be a big, I think, unless Joe Mazzulla drops down to playoff bound, we're going to push him all the way back after this is all said and done.
What makes you put him as a championship head coach?
I just think that he's just been consistent through the years.
Consistent losing in the second round?
But he's never actually had that team. He's never actually collapsed in the playoffs. If that makes sense. He's never had a team that's all right, you're gonna win it all. And, he just collapsed. Spo's never done that. Tyronn Lue, I don't think he's ever done that. Joe Mazzulla he's been gifted this team already. Mike Brown, I think, has collapsed a few. He was almost considered a terrible coach for a bit early on. I think maybe a decade.
Got fired.
He got
fired by the Cavs.
So okay, so let me go over this real quick because I think you're misremembering his coaching resume. So, last couple years with Brunson and Randall, he's made the playoffs. Both second round exits, right? Good teams though. Good teams. I can get behind that. Year before that with the Knicks, didn't make the playoffs, 37-45. Year before that, 41-31, they made the playoffs, first round exit. Year before that, missed the playoffs, 19-21. Or what year was? Oh, that was the COVID year. Okay. So, yeah, so they didn't make playoffs that year. Year before that, 47-35, decent ratio, made the playoffs, lost in the first round. Year before that with Minnesota, because you got to remember his Minnesota years, missed the playoffs. So that year I just went over, that was the first round exit with the Timberwolves with Jimmy Butler and Cat and Wiggins, and then he missed the playoffs before that. Then he was with Chicago, they made the playoffs every year, first and second round exits.
Oh, but do you know why? What happened to Derrick Rose? What happened, and who did they have to play? They had to play LeBron.
They did, but if you remember, they were up on the series, and in that game that Derrick Rose tore his ACL, and he was playing him in the fourth quarter in the playoffs in the second round. That's a coaching issue.
That is a coaching issue. I'm not saying it seems like I'm putting up really high in the championship caliber because there are a lot of teams down there that do have a championship caliber coach, and we haven't gotten there yet. So he's gonna end up being in the lower caliber, but I think he can lead a great team. I mean, that's that ding. And so far we have the playoff bound coaches. All of them have some sort of ding, but with Tom, it's just the minutes that are just kind of ridiculous that he plays his players. And if you had to rank that part of him as as a grade, you can give him an F there.
I don't know about you, Sam. I'm okay putting him high playoff bound. We could put him as the best playoff bound team, but he's not a championship coach to me.
You can't, but then you have to move Joe Mazzulla down.
But he has a championship. He has a championship.
If you put Tom Thibodeau with that team, they're going to win a championship. I'm telling you that.
I mean,
or everyone's going to get injured playing 38 minutes.
If you put Doc Rivers with that team, they're winning a championship. That's
I don't know.
That's a solid team like that,
I I think we have to move Joe Mazzulla down. If you're going to do this, you have to move Joe Mazzulla down. You can't be there. Because I cannot put Joe Mazzulla on top of Tom Thibodeau. I just can't. That's just insane. That is insane.
I don't know. Nothing in... I mean, how many times was he a 1 seed in his career? Last time was maybe with the Bulls?
I mean,
one time?
What about this team? He took it to the West. He took it to Eastern Conference Finals. And
nope.
We didn't even get to see...
He didn't play... They didn't make it to the Eastern Conference Finals.
Well, we didn't get to see them make it to the Eastern Conference Finals because their whole team just fell apart. Just injuries. I mean, it is like, you can blame that on the coaches. You can blame that, sure. But he has not had really a bad stint. And he's been in the league for how long? He's not... I mean, he just... Compared to all the other playoff-bound coaches, I don't see a big mark on him.
See, kind of the same thing that I said with Mike Brown with Tom Thibodeau is like, this is the year, where you can kind of be like, okay, this is the year where we kind of like, either we realize whether Tom's the guy with how he constructed and can play his players, or if it falls apart and they're like a 4 seed next year, first round exit type, then we're like, okay, maybe Tom's not as good as we thought he was. So I think this year is the proving year, but as of right now, I think we put him in the top playoff bound.
Honestly, the champions bracket should be reserved for guys who have won the championship before.
It's a championship caliber coach, not a coach that has won a championship. You can
but
win
I mean,
if
they won a championship, then they have championship caliber.
You can have a super team. If I took Tom Thibodeau and I put him, I don't know, like on the Brooklyn Nets instead of Steve Nash, they're gonna win that championship. That's the thing.
It's a lot of ifs.
But that's you can't just put Joe Mazzulla on top of a guy who has how many years of experience in the league.
So he has more chances at the apple, but he's never done it, and Mazzulla did it in his 3rd year.
Second.
How many? He was the Celtics. The Celtics are a well-run organization, and that works against Joe Mazzulla. You think Joe Mazzulla is not that good of a coach?
No, it works for him.
It works for him, yes. They're just a well-ran organization right now. They've always been. You can't put Joe Mazzulla on top of Tom Thibodeau.
All right, well, we already decided that we're going to talk about re-ranking later. So we'll come back at this.
I don't think we need to rank it. Sam, I don't think you think we need to rank it. But we will.
No, but we'll talk about it later. Next, we got Jamahl Mosley. Is that correct? With the Magic? Yep.
Mm.
So, where are we thinking for Jamahl? I think he just finished his 3rd season.
Yeah, I'm going to let you guys lead with this one because I kind of have a pretty good idea of where I want him at.
I put him at... Needs a solid team. High tier. Needs a solid team.
Yeah, I'm thinking either kind of like right around, either before or after Will Hardy and playoff bound, or maybe right ahead of Doc in the needs solid team. I just feel like with what he did this year, like the Magic probably, I would assume, probably by far was the most overachieving team this year, if we were to come to that conclusion. But I think that this is a team that's kind of going in the right direction. Like, if we're going to put Will Hardy in the playoff bound because he needs to kind of construct his team, like Jamahl Mosley already has a year ahead of Will Hardy, and he's kind of like starting that process.
He's already done it, to be honest.
Yeah, and he helped fill a missing piece on their team with getting KCP. So I feel like that playoff bound area right in front or behind Will Hardy is kind of what I'm thinking.
I agree with that as well. I think, I think that them and the Jazz are really close. It's just the Magic have made the playoffs, and they were a competitive team in the playoffs. So
almost beat the Cavs.
Yeah. So, and he's done that in his 2nd year, with a really, really young team that honestly probably had one of the worst guard groups in the Eastern Conference playoffs this year. So, yeah, he has my vote for maybe above or behind the Jazz, whatever you guys think.
Do you think probably right behind the Jazz?
Yeah.
Fair enough.
All right, next we got Jason Kidd. And off the top of my head, I don't remember how long he's been with.
There's going to be a lot of playoff bound coaches we're going to have at some point to have to start moving a couple down just because they didn't make the cut.
Potentially.
I mean, I told you that. Like I said solid team, but you guys just moved them to playoff bound. I was like, okay.
What team though?
That was the
Magic.
was the first thing I said. Magic. I said needs a solid team.
Oh, I gotcha.
Yeah. So Kidd just came off of his third year of being head coach, and he was I mistaken, or am I thinking crazy? Was he a Bucks head coach for? Yeah, he was.
Yeah, with
head
Giannis.
coach of the Bucks.
Yeah,
I didn't do anything.
And the Brooklyn Nets.
Didn't know that.
I don't know if he was head coach for Brooklyn Nets.
Yeah, I don't think that's right.
He was the head coach of the Milwaukee Bucks 2014 to 2018 and the Brooklyn Nets 2013 to 2014.
Okay. Needs a solid team.
Look this up here. So, no. So he was the Brooklyn head coach for 1 year. That was his first year coaching.
Yep, okay. 1 year.
Okay. They were pretty decent. They made the playoffs. That was the year they went with Tyronn and KG and that weird team, Joe Johnson and them. It was with Milwaukee for a while, and then he was an assistant with the Lakers for a couple years. You probably remember that, Gage. And then he was with Dallas the past 4 years.
3.
If we,
3 years.
Yeah.
He got hired in 21.
3 years. It's having it count this next year because the year started already. I think he's another playoff bound type of coach. He could barely sneak in champions if he had won this year, and then I would honestly have him and Mazzulla switch spots. But he's just not quite there. But him and Thibodeau I'd have like right next to each other. I don't know which part or which side. But they're right next to each other. And honestly, I think we can just honestly go ahead and move the Jazz and Magic down respectively. Both two as well. Because there's not going to be room for them.
Yeah. I think that's right.
Yeah. And then probably I'm okay putting Thibodeau above Jason Kidd, I think. I'm okay with that.
So this?
I think so, yeah. I think that's probably the right way to put it.
You cool with that, Gage?
I'm like thinking about it because I feel like I
mean, you can convince me to put him ahead of Thibodeau. But you can't convince me to put him and Thibodeau in the championship coach tier.
No, I'm not putting him in the championship. I'm putting him like even lower.
Lower? That's kind of what I was thinking too.
I can see it.
Messing around between Quin Snyder range.
I was gonna say I'm thinking maybe a little bit behind Nick Nurse.
You think Mike Brown's a better coach than Jason Kidd?
I think Nick Nurse is a better coach than Mike Brown. But you guys,
so why don't we put the Kings behind Nick Nurse and Nick Nurse ahead of Jason Kidd? I think that's probably the right way to put it. Because I don't think Mike Brown tops Jason Kidd. Yeah.
I would put Quin Snyder ahead of Mike Brown.
I could be convinced of that too.
Me too, yeah. Yeah, I could see that too, yeah. Okay. That's, I think, where things belong right now.
Okay. All right, next we got Michael Malone.
Mikey. He is... Yeah, he's ahead of Joe Mazzulla. And honestly, for me, I know y'all don't agree, but he'd be ahead of Tyronn Lue as well. Just for me. He's got the championship, but I think, and he built the roster with the front office very well. His teams are always very consistent, always top 3 in the West every single year. He's really smart with his rotations and X's and O's and DHOs. His assistants are really smart. I just don't know what knocks he really has, honestly. I think they just ran into the wrong team last year.
Something that I think kind of just holds him back for me, but like it's not gonna knock him down to playoff bound or anything, but just like I feel like he's one of the more hot-headed coaches. Like, I mean, you guys heard what he said at the championship parade talking about the Lakers, and it's like, come on, bro, you didn't need to bring that up. And all this. I mean, he's just been talking bad stuff. There was one game I think against the Wolves where there was just bad officiating, and he's just going crazy. And I understand that, but like, you don't see Joe Mazzulla do that. You don't see Spoelstra do that. You don't see Tyronn Lue do that. Like, they're just able to keep their composure after games where Mike Malone doesn't. But in the end, that doesn't really matter when it comes to this tier list. But I think that's like the only downfall, because like, I mean, he utilizes his team well. He was able to realize that like Jokic is the guy that we got to play through, and we got Murray who can play pretty good off ball. We got MPJ, great off ball, and we're gonna see how good this team can really be, because like if they're like a 7 or 8 seed next year, we could potentially start thinking like, okay, maybe he's more playoff bound than championship, because they lost Bruce Brown this year and they didn't even make it to the Western Conference Finals. Whether that was important or not, just that was their main guy that they lost. This year they lose KCP, so now they're down to like their big three, and they're gonna have Christian Brown playing quite a bit of
Not
minutes.
Quite big three, big four.
I know, but he's gonna be playing more minutes than he did. So we'll see how good that Nuggets team is, but I think we're good with him in the championships category for now.
So, Rick Carlisle for me for the Pacers would be honestly like somewhere between the middle 3 teams in playoff bound, because he's always made the playoffs, but he's also a guy that's never made it to the Eclipse. I think he's a smart guy, but I think he is one of the guys that personality sometimes rubs off on the players a bit of the wrong way, from what I've heard. So I think he's a good coach. I just don't know if he's the high tier playoff bound or low tier champion coach.
I'd put him ahead of Jason Kidd.
I could do that. You could convince me of that, yeah. Possibly Nick Nurse, but maybe not.
No.
Yeah, I think I'm good with him right there behind Nick Nurse. I don't really have too much more to add to that.
Okay.
All right, next we have Willie Green from the New Orleans Pelicans.
He's in the middle of Doc Rivers and Jamahl Mosley for me. I feel like he always will need a solid team, and even when he has a solid team, and I understand the team is hurt a lot of the time, but it's just not a great excuse. So, yeah, his team is really good, but they've never made it past the first round or even barely made the playoffs. So
I was gonna say, did they got swept against OKC, didn't they?
Yeah. And they probably shouldn't have, but I think that was a late game adjustment problem, actually, from what I remember.
And no Zion. Right?
Yeah, but the game was within like 4 points.
Yeah.
So they could have won it.
Okay.
Anything to add for Willie Green?
Nope, sounds good.
It's crazy that the Pistons are the only, or I mean the Bulls are the only team. Or just like
so far.
Yeah, so far, I mean, well, it's not looking great.
Yeah, with the Pistons, we got J.B. Bickerstaff, who got fired after they lost in the second round to the Celtics, who ended up winning the championship. That was kind of a weird firing. And then, we could have been talking about Monty right now, but less than a month ago, he got fired. And so JB found a job. Where do we think about J.B. Bickerstaff?
I think around playoff bound.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know why they fired the dude. Like, I don't even know why. Like, I don't know what the Bucks were thinking. They just were leaning onto Giannis's gut a little too much. And I'm just...
If they are playoff bound, I think they're at like kind of the end, maybe above the Kings. Just because whenever he's made the playoffs, he has had a defensive player of the year candidate. He has had an all-star, an all-NBA type of player. He's had one of the top 5 rim protectors in the NBA. He's had multiple top 5 picks. So, I feel like he uses his team wisely, but not maximizing their potential. I think is a good way to put him as a head coach. If
Yeah,
he can do that with the Pistons, that'll be great.
Yeah, I mean, if we're putting him above or behind Mike Brown, I'm cool with that. But personally, I kind of feel like he could need solid team. Because, for the last 3 years, he's had Evan Mobley, who's been up there for like a defensive player of the year. Jarrett Allen has been great for his team. Obviously, Donovan Mitchell. Darius Garland has progressed immensely these last few years. But the year before all that happened really was, 22-50. And then he took over in 19-20 because he was a assistant. But then he was with the Grizzlies, and they didn't do anything those first 2 years, or those only 2 years. So, other than once he got Donovan Mitchell and a good Evan Mobley, Jarrett Allen, like once all that kind of came together, they started making the playoffs.
Tidbit that you didn't mention either. He was the intern for the Rockets when he fired Kevin McHale with Harden in that team, and they didn't make the playoffs as well.
Yeah. So that I would say he'd probably be top, needs a solid team for me.
Yeah.
I
like
clarify.
that spot.
I was confusing Bickerstaff with
Budenholzer.
With Griffin.
Oh, Adrian Griffin.
Adrian Griffin?
Yeah.
He's not a head coach though anymore.
I know he's not a head coach anymore.
Oh.
I don't know why I thought. I guess they look the same. I don't know.
Weird.
Like I was just thinking in my mind, I was thinking Adrian Griffin. So I was like, yeah. But I do think they fired Adrian Griffin for no reason.
I agree with that. I agree with that too. Yeah. Okay. They should not have done that.
All right. Next
Rockets.
we have Ime Udoka from the Rockets.
For me, and y'all can decide on this because I'm a little biased on this, but I think he's somewhere in playoff bound. Maybe middle of Pacers, Mavericks, Hawks-ish area. I think he has probably a little bit more to prove until he gets to that higher playoff bound team. He did make the finals in that 1 year with the Celtics, but I don't think that's enough to put him in the high playoff bound quite yet. But I think what he was able to do with the Rockets, being a 500 record after we've been really bad for the past 3 years with a hurt Şengün at the end of the year, Jalen Green being off and on, Tari Eason being out most of the year, all young guys. Fred VanVleet and Dylan Brooks the first year as really guys on a bad team that didn't really know what they were doing. To be able to go 500 and almost make the playoffs in a stacked West with all that going against you and a new coaching staff in your first year as a head coach, I think that is a huge accomplishment, and I'm expecting them to make a 5-6 seed this year and make a really competitive first round series against someone.
I think I'd put him right behind the Knicks. Maybe.
I think that might be a little high, objectively, for me.
I don't think so.
Nick Nurse, right behind Nick Nurse.
I think Nick Nurse or Rick Carlisle.
Extremely consistent.
He is extremely consistent, but you got to remember the sample size also is very small so far.
But I don't even think that a lot of people don't even think that Rockets team had any business going 500. Like, really.
You wouldn't think so, but with our roster, they do. I know it's a young roster, but Fred VanVleet, All-Star before, Şengün, All-Star numbers this year, almost made the All-Star team. Jalen Green had a solid 2.5 months where he was playing like an All-Star. Dylan Brooks is a second-team All-Defensive player. We have 5 top 5 picks. Like, we should be a positive team. But being that it was his first year and that it was kind of just a team that was meshed together, it's an accomplishment that we were able to do that. But you're right, in a stacked West or in a non-stacked West regular year, we would have made an 8-7 seed, which I like. But ultimately, we have to judge him off of the end result and the sample size.
Okay.
I think where we have him right here is fine. I think that's fine.
That's fine. I think Joe Mazzulla still has to come down when we're done.
You're stuck on Mazzulla. Okay.
I am so stuck on him.
Okay. Well, maybe we will once we'll get a couple more teams in here. Chris Finch.
Yeah, Chris Finch.
He's a playoff bound coach. I don't know where I would put him exactly.
Maybe behind Ime?
maybe behind or in front of Ime, and then no, I would put him in front of Ime. I think.
Front of Ime.
I think so.
I'd put him behind.
I'm cool with putting him behind too.
Behind.
I just figured since they made a real push this year, and last year they also made the playoffs. I mean, this year they were the number 2 team in the West, or maybe 3. It might be
3.
Getting 3. Yeah. I think it's time. I think it's time to move the Kings down one slot. They didn't make the cut.
So Kings.
Yeah, with the Pistons.
There we go. All right.
Yeah.
Anything to add on to that? I don't think I really have much to say on Chris Finch.
Not really. I think he's a good coach. I think he's a really good coach, honestly.
All right. So then next we have
Mike
Budenholzer.
Yeah.
Yep, from the Suns. This is a coach.
I was gonna say, honestly, with this one, you could really convince me of anything besides the last tier. The super team can save you.
I mean, he was always, a playoff-bound coach, and then they finally made the trade for Drew Holiday, got rid of Eric Bledsoe, which ended up being the problem, and they win a championship. And I still firmly believe that they could have won a championship, not this last year, but the year before that, if Giannis doesn't go down the first round. And then they, they were the 1 seed and they lost in 5 or 6 or whatever it was. But Budenholzer didn't deserve to get fired. Giannis went down. Your top player goes down, and you're just going to, like that, 2 years after a championship?
I mean, Budenholzer has the most controversial playbooks, like plays in the NBA. Like, the dude his defensive, schemes are just leave the guy open, leave them open, let them shoot. And, I mean, he definitely, and he hasn't really shown that he's been willing to change any of these playbooks, even though he's been getting burned by great 3-point shooting teams. So, I think he's like a Doc Rivers, like not willing to make the big changes during the game. He does stick to his guns. I think he got lucked out because he had Giannis. I'd have to put him
right behind Jason Kidd.
In front of Jason Kidd.
I was gonna say I would put him slightly in front of the Pacers, Rick Carlisle. That's what I would do, I think.
Okay.
All right. This one, I think we know where this guy's going. Greg Popovich for the Spurs. Super team can't save you.
I'd have to put him behind the Heat, though.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's what the real discussion is. Is he behind or in front of Spoelstra?
He has to be behind, just because it's like, I mean, Spo's been really good as of late, and I think
they got to put him in front of Spoelstra.
Historically, you'd put it in front of Spoelstra, but we haven't seen Pop with a great team in a while.
Right.
You would like to think he can still do it. I mean, after next season, maybe we move him in front of Spo, but
he just has more championships at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I think that's worthy enough to break that tiebreaker.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of thinking too.
But
it's close. It's not no disrespect.
Has been really good.
It's not no disrespect to Spoelstra.
Two finals appearances from Spo. 2 final appearances from Spo. He didn't even belong in the finals. He did not.
Do you think that if you went up to you went up to Spoelstra and you said, "I think Greg Popovich is a better coach than you," do you think he's going to take that as disrespect? Probably not.
No.
But any other head coach on this list,
if you do that to Greg Popovich, he's going to be like, he can do this. He can do
he can do the Tom Brady.
But the thing is that it's hard because you can't knock each other. You can't. Okay, in this modern era, maybe Spo's a better coach.
Okay,
the way the game has changed.
That's interesting perspective. I could see it.
with Popovich, he has the historical his resume is much better than Spo. But if we're just talking like last 5 years, but the thing is, Pop hasn't had a great team in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
But Spo has had a great team, has had a good team.
He hasn't won the championship.
2 times, pushed the Celtics. I mean, how many teams actually took a game from the Celtics this postseason? How many?
Three.
Okay, what were those teams? It was
Heat, Cavs, Mavericks. Everyone but the Pacers.
Yeah.
Okay.
One game though. You're talking about one game.
You're talking about one game without Jimmy. I mean, or was
they do the other 3 after that?
Either way, we're splitting hairs here.
Yeah, we're splitting hairs. Sam, I know you're nostalgia, but you have to.
Sam. PT wants to put him ahead of Spo too.
I think Spo has to go ahead of Popovich, but
I don't think so. I think the tiebreakers, or I think the championships are tiebreaker.
It's just this era right now.
Mm.
We're working with our sample size.
Yep. The Thunder with Mark Daigneault. Daigneault. My bad.
Ahead of Joe Mazzulla, please.
Ahead of Joe Mazzulla?
I would put him around the Rockets Wolves area.
That's what I was thinking too.
He's stressed out. And while you do this, and you can put him ahead of Udoka, probably.
Yeah. Yeah, they were the 1 seed this last year.
And I could say you can move the Hawks down 1 as well.
Yeah.
And maybe you bump Memphis down 1.
I don't know about that.
Wow, we're running out of room here. We're almost done though. We're almost done. So
okay.
Yeah, we're almost done. And these 2 are not going to go in these middle 2 categories. We know that.
Yeah.
Chauncey Billups with the Portland Trailblazers.
I feel like this one is different because I feel like with an actual good team, he could be a good coach.
No.
Okay, well you can throw him in there. Go ahead.
Yeah, super team can't save you.
No, super team.
I don't know though because he hasn't proven that a super team can't save him.
I think Portland is a good team. I really do.
I think Portland this year is a good team.
I think Portland has a good squad. I mean, that's crazy, but like I think they have a good squad.
Interesting.
They shouldn't be this bad.
Comparatively to the rest of the NBA, I don't know if I agree with that, but
compared to the rest of the NBA, they shouldn't be this bad. Is what I'm trying to say.
I don't know.
Like they have like a decent player. Like to me, they're on par with like built, like the Rockets. I really think so. I really think they could compete with like the Rockets. I think they have Ayton, they have Jeremy Grant, they have
Anthony Simons, and that's where they're like Shaden Sharp and Scoot are good, but they're young.
They have Scoot.
They're progressing still.
Exactly.
They have a number 1 option though.
They shouldn't be this bad though.
They have a number 1 option though.
It should be Ayton.
That might be their problem.
I think it started when they signed Jeremy Grant basically for a max, and then that next season they trade for DeAndre Ayton.
Yeah. Oh, gotcha. I see what you're saying. Yeah.
And it's just.
I refuse to believe that this Portland Trailblazers team is this bad. That's why Chauncey just throw him in the red. I think we're all okay with that. But
I mean, that's fine. They wouldn't be ahead of any teams in the orange, so yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. And then the last one, Steve Kerr with the Warriors. I think if we put right behind Spo.
Let's see where we're at here. Because he's a very controversial.
Yeah, I don't think so. He's been so bad like the last couple of years.
Some people are.
But he's the coach that revolutionized the game, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's
team
fair.
ball.
That's fair.
Like, I mean, we could talk about these last few years, but
yeah, I guess so. I'd put him ahead of those 3 teams. Yeah.
Like, I mean, you could, if you wanted, you could have just had Steph Curry shoot 35 times a game, Klay shoot his 10, and then like nobody else touched the ball. But that's not what he preached.
Yeah,
His rotations
right.
sometimes are so bad.
Well, it's because they've never really had like a good center, in my opinion, to kind of like help narrow it out.
But
They've
he
had to
wants
play
that.
Draymond at the 7 sometimes.
They want
who
that.
He's supposed to be 6'9", but technically I think he's 6'7", or sorry, 6'9", but he's 6'7".
Put
so
him
it's
ahead
like,
of Mazzulla, but behind Clippers and Nuggets.
No.
I
think
so.
Sam is right. I was thinking like the same, but then Sam convinced me. You ever hear that thing of like the phrase of when you're telling
Steph Curry changed basketball?
No.
No.
It's like there's only one way to skin a cat. I mean, that's like it's a very like old man way of saying like on how a coach is like there's only one way to play basketball. And Steve Kerr, regardless of he was told, did revolutionize the game because he was willing to lean on a 6'1" point guard to take most of the shots and change the game. On top of that, even when they got Klay Thompson, we were thinking that they were washed. This is remnants of what happened when the first Celtics dynasty, back when they're heading into the 70s, won a championship in the 70s. The Celtics only got one championship in the 70s. They weren't even supposed to be there. But now, fast forward to when Klay Thompson finally comes back, they pulled off a championship. I mean, typically dynasties there just die, right? Because, we're all obsessed with the Lakers. We're obsessed with the Clippers. But Steve Kerr willing that team to a championship, no KD, I think that puts him ahead as Tyronn Lue. I don't think Tyronn Lue could. He would not. He couldn't.
Even if he's had a healthy Clippers roster, I don't think he can.
No. It's not even having a healthy Clippers roster. It's having a team like on their last legs that was an old dynasty has-been and still won a championship. They were no longer like, I don't think people were even taking the Warriors seriously, but they won a championship over who? The Celtics. So I'm gonna have to put
you can convince me. Although I will say that I think as far as revolutionizing how the way NBA basketball is played, I think I would rather give Steph Curry the nod opposed to Steve Kerr. Like obviously Steve Kerr gave him the faith and the ability to be able to like greenlight that, but ultimately there's been small point guards that take 25, 30 shots and 10 3-pointers a game in the past.
But he formed
not a lot of them, but there has been some. But they weren't able to do it like Curry was able to do it. So it's working together. But I guess I do like your point of being able to not only have that dynasty they had, but also get the one in 2021, I think it was. That one kind of sealed it for me. Yeah, for sure. I can see it.
Okay. All right, so now looking at this, who do we want to move up? Who do we want to move down?
Mazzulla has to come down.
Move him down?
I'm
not willing to argue about it anymore.
He's an interim coach.
If he doesn't think an NBA championship coach wants to, or is a champion's head coach, move him down.
And
Nick Nurse won a championship, and we have him Nick Nurse right down there.
But it's the law of small sample size. That's what it comes down to, and I know that you understand
there's
that.
There's a lot of variance. So either he's in a super team can't save you, or he's a championship. That's a variance.
But if you also go back to what I said earlier, I said I was thinking that you should be in the playoff bound because this was, out of the last 5 years, this is probably the best, roster that we've had win a championship, in my opinion. If not the best starting five.
This is the best Celtics team in the last 15 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's why I was kind of like to a point, every time that you see the Celtics take a timeout, though, you see a bucket scored. You see that with Tyronn Lue. You see that with Mike Malone. You see that with Kerr. You see that with all the great coaches. Even Tom Thibodeau and Nick Nurse. But I just feel like when you have, 4 guys that you can rely on any night to get you 20 points or have a great game, at that point it's above you, So I'm cool with moving Mazzulla down because we do have 5 coaches and champions. So is there any other ones that we were thinking about moving?
I think every other one was good, honestly. Yeah. It's kind of crazy that Jason Kidd made the finals last year and he's at the bottom of playoff bound, but
that is crazy.
There's a lot of good head coaches in the NFL.
The
NBA.
I mean, personally, I couldn't really put Jason Kidd too much higher because of the fact that he was also part of a tanking scandal.
Maybe we
so that and the years with the Bucks too. Like he never did anything with the Bucks teams either. Besides,
I think he had like one playoff series win. I think.
Yeah.
In that tenure.
Yeah.
So
maybe so.
Maybe we moved Ime up one.
Over Mark?
Maybe.
I mean, that's what I was thinking originally.
I don't like that. Even as a Rockets fan, I don't like that.
Okay.
Personally.
All right. So then our final recap here. Let me make sure that I can get all the names right here. All right. So in the champions category, we have Greg Popovich, Erik Spoelstra, Steve Kerr, Tyronn Lue, Mike Malone. In the playoff bound, we have Joe Mazzulla, Tom Thibodeau, Nick Nurse, Mark Daigneault.
Mm-hmm.
There we go. Ime Udoka, Chris Finch, Mike Budenholzer, Rick Carlisle, and Jason Kidd. In the needs a solid team, we have Quin Snyder, Mike Brown, J.B. Bickerstaff, Will Hardy, Jamahl Mosley, Doc Rivers, Willie Green, and Taylor Jenkins. In the super team can't save you, we got Chauncey Billups paired there with Billy Donovan. And then in the to be determined, we had those coaches that I named earlier. Let me pull them up. With the Cavs, we have Kenny Atkinson, Jordy Fernandez with the Nets, Darko with the Raptors. I'm not going to try to say his last name again. Brian Keefe with the Wizards, Charles Lee with the Hornets, and then JJ Redick with the Lakers. So there we go. That's the tier list.
Now,
is it perfect now that we got Joe Mazzulla out of the champions category?
It's 90%. I'm telling you, we were cooked in the very first 10 minutes. I was like, oh no, we're cooked. But
I mean,
there's also an argument that we can have that doesn't actually need to happen between Spo and Kerr that we just completely ignored. But
it's fine. It's fine. It's fine.
Yeah. But anyways, is there any last things you guys need to add?
No. That would be longer. I was just saying I was gonna throw a nitpick what if we threw imagined the 6 teams that are not determined where they're gonna end up, but let's not get into
I'll tell you right now. Lakers super team can't save you. Nets super team can't save you. Raptors super team can't save you. Wizards super team can't save you.
Team.
I mean, all these teams, with the exception, I think, of the Cavs, has had 2 or 3 head coaches in the last 5 years too. With the Lakers, revolving door.
Hornets
Nets,
not.
revolving door.
Hornets haven't. They finally got rid of that bum, Steve Clifford. After
that's
9 years.
Whoa.
I hate that guy.
Yeah. But anyways, don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Momentum MVP. Follow our Facebook page at MVP Momentum Podcast, and check us out on YouTube at MVP Momentum Podcast. I've been Sam Holcroft.
Gage Zolikoff.
I've been Payne Thompson.
Thanks for listening.